Brother,
sir.
thank you for taking your time to meet with me and join the
Absolutely.
podcast, man.
I'm super excited, man. Super excited.
Absolutely. When Moni and I had our podcast, I was thinking of a few other people that I met in Atlanta, and you're definitely one of those people that I got into like a little conversation with, and I was like, this guy's a cool guy, and I think he would be great to talk to on the podcast. People need to hear about you.
Oh, well, thank you. That's extremely kind of you. Extremely kind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I wanna start this off with sharing a little bit about who Russ is. I'll be. I mean, we met in Atlanta, and we only had a brief conversation, and
Absolutely.
I really didn't even get to know the context behind Russ, and I personally want to know myself.
Yeah.
Um, Nonetheless, the people that will be watching this or listening to this, and so I want to
Sure.
know where who is Russ? What is the context behind Russ? What is the journey leading up to meeting Christ and then going into ministry and then where you are in this season right now? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. How much time do we have?
Okay.
um, no. Man. So grateful just to even have a question like that asked. And truthfully, I feel like, part of the journey of, life and especially adulthood and, kind of that journey of going from young adulthood into, I'm 33 now, about to
Mm,
be 34 in
mm,
December. And
mm.
I feel like so much of the journey does kind of become even understanding who you are as yourself. And so when you ask the question, who is Russ? I kind of ask the same question, right? And I feel like that's kind of the joy of the journey we get to go on of following Jesus is not only do we learn more about him and to become more like him, but we learn more about ourselves and our true
Yeah.
authentic self, in that day
Mm,
to day.
mm,
But to answer your question about kind of context for getting to where we are today, born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and so grew up just south of Dallas, and was adopted at a very young age by a single mom. And
mm,
so my entire upbringing never had a father figure in the home, never had a husband figure in the home. My mom
mm,
never got married, and so my father figures were very sparse in my early days,
mm,
and at 12 years old in November of 2003, I got invited to an incredible church that's now called Oaks Church. It's a
mm,
beautiful, amazing congregation now pastored by a pastor named Chris Rayleigh, but at the time it was pastored by a great man named Scott Wilson, and the
mm,
youth pastor there is a man named Dan Hunter, who is now the lead pastor at a church called Grace Church in Houston. So a lot of Texas
mm,
roots still, but that is my spiritual home, if you will. And
mm,
gave my life to the Lord there in November of 2003. And really from that time on, church kind of became like my everything, like my everyday life. I was what we would call back then a church rat. I you know
yeah.
I was always at the church. If the doors were unlocked, I was there. If I was getting out of school, I was going to church. If I was not working, I was at church, and that just really
Mm,
kind of became the rhythm of my life. And I'm so grateful for those days because it gave me a love for the church beyond a program, beyond a service,
mm,
beyond a specific day of the week. That time in my life really showcased to me that, like, man, church is a whole lot more than just a single service or a youth service or a Sunday morning service out of the week.
mm,
There's more to this. And so when I was called to full time ministry at the age of 15 in summer of 2006. It was immediate. It was okay, this is the course that I'm headed on now.
Mm,
And, during Bible college, kind of strayed away from that a little bit because I got an idea of what I thought success would look like. And that was actually
mm,
to play guitar, to record, to tour, to play with different bands. And I
mm,
was actually getting some momentum there. But in the very end of my senior year, the Lord used a dear friend just to very gently but firmly remind me that
mm,
hey, you're called to something more than this. You're called to more than playing guitar. And it was from that moment that it just clicked. And so since then, I've spent the last 12 years outside of college. After graduating college, I've spent the last 12 years in one form or fashion serving the local
mm.
church, specifically in a lot of next gen contexts. And so,
Yeah.
serving as a children's pastor at a church plant, full time youth pastor at different churches, young adults pastor in various seasons. But man, just throughout all of that, have just continued to grow in such a genuine love for the local church.
Mm,
I truly believe that it is still the hope of the world. And I truly still
absolutely.
believe that the greatest days for the local church are still in front of us. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the healthy perspective you have on church, especially with so much going on social media about, church failings, or, pastors who have moral failures. I think
Right.
beyond all this, and in spite of all this, you just have such a healthy perspective of the church is still the hope of the world, despite the fact that there are imperfect people in the church.
Yeah,
And I'm grateful for that, because we need more perspectives like that, to
absolutely.
always remind us and encourage us that church is still the hope of the world. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I
Absolutely. Yeah.
I do want to go back to something that you said, which was how you define success in, what was it, Bible college?
Yeah. Yeah.
I want you to speak a little bit on that, because I feel that for many Christians, and in the context of Christianity, I find that there is either a discontentment or even a discouragement that
Mm,
comes because there is a misunderstanding on success in the
yeah.
Christian sense. And I want you to speak into that a little bit, if you can,
Yeah.
and just ways that maybe you could even encourage people.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that I the first thing that I have to do is I have to give credit and context to my theological heritage. And so
Mm,
I think it's
mm,
important to keep in mind that different denominational backgrounds and different theological backgrounds will really kind of
mm,
have their varying versions of success. And so for me, I speak from a primarily, charismatic background,
mm,
very, very much Pentecostal, not only in my church gathering, settings, but also in my personal practices.
mm,
But that said, I think that the pitfall, and that might be an extreme word, but the snare that the Pentecostal movement has sometimes gotten into, and sometimes what they've fallen into when it comes to success, is believing that God's manifest presence, right, is most
mm,
manifest in large rooms, in packed altars, in high expression, in all of these types of things. And I'm not saying that those things are bad by any means, because the truth is that without those types of experiences, there's much of the scriptures that we don't get to experience, right? So I think that there's very much
yeah.
space for those
Mm,
large crowds, and for the high expression, and for the many at a time repenting and coming to a greater level of surrender
mm,
to the Lord. I think that there's beauty in all of that stuff, but the challenge
mm,
is that as I've grown in my own understanding of the way of Jesus, and as we look at the
mm,
early church, even we realize that God's manifest presence, which is the mark of success, right? Like let's be clear. there's a reason that in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus instructs us to pray, "Let your kingdom come, let your will be done here on earth as it is in heaven." Right? There's a reason for that, and so the challenge becomes, how do we make sure that that is still kept as the mark of success, regardless of the circumstance that I find myself in, right? And so, we see that the truth of the matter is that while many of Jesus's miracles are done in public with large gatherings
Mm.
and crowds and all of these things, there's also many of
Hmm.
them that are done in private. And the truth of the matter is that even beyond that, we see that those private moments are actually some of the ones that have the deepest impact, not only in the
So good.
person, but in the place that they return to, right? And so
Yes.
we can look at so
Yes.
many people throughout the Gospels who are impacted personally by Jesus in a private moment. And it's those moments that then lead to a bigger impact, right?
Mm.
And I think that, man, when Jesus sends out the disciples and he says, "Hey, you will do works even greater than what I've done," the truth is that, yes, I believe that that applies to, casting out demons, healing the sick, raising the dead. It does apply to all those miraculous things, but it also applies to those small acts of compassion. It also applies to those small acts of intentionality. It applies to the slowing down to see and hear and care for the one, right?
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
because Jesus truly is our example on this too, right? I mean, if we think about
Yeah.
Jesus, Jesus knew he was going to carry the cross at 33, but he had no
Yeah.
problem building tables for years before that, right?
Wow.
Um, and so if Jesus is the mark
Mm.
of long term, playing the long game, seeing success not as a size of a crowd, but as the size of an impact on an individual, then that's the
Mm.
model that we must choose to follow as well. And those small moments, I believe, of intentionally listening to and obeying the Holy Spirit, those are the things that will compound and that will count just as much as the big extraordinary moments that seem noteworthy to the human eye. And
Yeah.
if I was preaching this, right, this is where in the
Yeah.
in the space that I would be in, you may have somebody in the room that they're like, "Well, Rath, where's that in the Bible?" And I would say, "I'm glad you asked," right? Because
Yeah.
Scripture actually makes this abundantly clear to us. We can actually see
Yeah.
in 2 Corinthians 5,
Mm.
Paul writes this, and he says, "Therefore, we are always confident, and we know that as long as we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. For we live by faith, not by sight. We are
Mm.
confident, I say, and would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So we make it our goal to please Him, whether we are at home in the body or away from it." And this is what is important to keep in mind.
Mm.
It says, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each
Mm.
of us may receive what is due us for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad." Paul
Wow.
doesn't say that we're going to be before the judgment seat of Christ to see how big of a crowd we could gather. He doesn't say, "Hey, how many people can you get to look at your marketing campaign?" He doesn't say
Mm.
that. He says we will stand before the judgment seat of Christ one day to receive what is due each of us for what is done in this bag of flesh that is the
Yeah.
human body. And then we see
Yeah.
this supported in Revelation 22 in verse
Mm.
12, right at the end of all of John's account of the revelation of Jesus Christ. It says, "Look, I am coming soon. My reward is with me, and I will give to each type of person according to what they have done."
Yes. Yes.
According to
Yes.
what they've
Yes.
done. How
Mm.
how incredible of a thought is that, Sam? That
Mm.
Jesus,
Mm.
while we're so fixated on the grandeur and the splendor and the visibility and the virality of what we can present as Christian life, that if we're honest, yes, most of us have good intentions behind it, but so much of it also, there's something that creeps up on us that says, "And if I can just get this
Mm.
many people to view this, then I'll know that I'm significant. Then I will know that I'm successful."
Mm.
But it's a challenge for us to remember and to recognize that we receive salvation according to what Jesus has done. Our
Yes. Yes.
salvation is his reward, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
us being able to be with him in heaven, that is his reward for what he did on the cross. But
Mm.
our reward, when all things are made new, is going to be based on our extraordinary and everyday obedience. Jesus is
Yeah.
going to look each of us in the eye, and he's going to have a running list of everything that we did for the sake of the gospel. And
That's right.
that is success. I would
Yeah.
much rather that my list be long with names of individuals that I've encouraged in the faith than to have it be
Mm.
short with, here's the crowd I gathered, here's the organization that I built, here's the brand that I built. I would much rather it be long with names than short with
Wow.
brands, if you will.
Yeah. 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 Dude, that is such a incredible insight, and my mind is going to so many different places right now. Um, I was actually writing a blog about this about a month ago, and I believe the title of the blog was "Living with Eternity in Mind," and
Yeah.
it was this idea that so many of us, especially as Christians, were so caught up with the accolades that we could get from this side
Mm,
of eternity, the acceptance, the likes, the comments, the approval we could get on this side, that we totally miss the perspective and the reality that there is eternity and that there is a judgment for believers, not a judgment of
yeah.
salvation, because for
Correct.
those who are saved in Christ, it's only done with the work of the cross and the blood of Jesus.
Right.
So it's not that judgment, but there is the judgment of what the Greeks called the bema, the great white throne, where God will judge believers according to what they have done on this side
Yeah.
of eternity. And actually reminds me of First Corinthians chapter 3, which is probably a passage you're familiar with as well,
Hmm.
where um, Paul the apostle, he says, because of God's grace, verse 10 of chapter 3, because of God's grace to me, I have laid the foundation like an expert builder. Now others are building on it. But whoever is building on this foundation must be very careful, for no one can
Mm,
lay any foundation other than the one we have already laid, which is Jesus Christ. Anyone who
yeah.
builds on that foundation, here it is, may use a variety of materials: gold, silver, jewels, wood, hay, or straw. But on judgment day, the Bema seat, there it is,
Hmm.
will reveal what kind of work each builder has done. The fire will
Yeah.
show if a person's work has any value. Verse 14 and last one. If the work survives, that builder will receive, there it is, a reward. But if the work is
Yeah.
burned up, it will be saved, but someone barely escaping through a wall of flames. Basically, what you're saying. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, Christians, don't be so caught up with the status and the accolades that you could get from this world. As a matter of fact, I
Correct.
think First John chapter 2 would talk about how if we're constantly thinking about these things, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, we don't have the love of the Father in us. We're really not
Correct.
doing the will of God. Um, and so I guess my follow-up question for you is, what is it, man? What's the void? Like, what is the void that Christians, from your perspective, are trying to fill? Because
Mm,
there's maybe we're so caught up on what we could get here on earth, but we're not viewing eternity with the right perspective, right? What
yeah.
is it like for you? What is it? Is it like we need acceptance? Is it because we're broken? Is it because maybe we, I don't know.
Yeah.
What would you say it is from your perspective?
Yeah. I think that the challenge is that it's not that we're viewing eternity from the wrong perspective. It's that we're not
Mm.
viewing eternity at all. We're not thinking about eternity at all.
That's good.
Right. I
Mm.
mean, it's this thing of like, we make we make forever life with God out to be this sort of like get out of jail free. I'm gonna get there when I get there. I've said the prayer. I
Mm,
read my Bible, and so I'm going to heaven one day, and that's it. But the
mm,
challenge becomes that we know we're going to heaven one day, but then we still live like hell here and now, right? Um, we
mm,
we we really, in a lot of ways, we follow the path of an archetype like Samson, right? I mean, Samson from before he was in his mom's belly, which is true of all of us. He was called by God, set apart by God. He was set apart for a very special purpose, right? But Samson falls into those same traps: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. We see it time and time again in his story. And it's funny because I actually recently I was in Arkansas preaching for my friend Danny Tuxhorn at Christian Life
mm,
Cathedral in Fayetteville, and I
mm,
actually taught on the story of Samson from a different angle. And I was actually teaching on the topic of pornography, ironically, and like kind of
mm,
it was a very beautiful story that God wrote through that time with those young people.
mm,
But the challenge that
mm,
I gave them is in Judges 16 when, or actually it's Judges 15 when Samson picks up the donkey's jawbone and he uses it to
mm,
kill 1,000 men. What's interesting is that after he does that, he holds up this jawbone and he actually praises the jawbone. He doesn't make a single
mm,
statement about how God gave him the strength to do that. He says, it's with this jawbone that I killed these 1,000 men. It's with this jawbone that I'm so strong and so great. And then literally the very next verse in Judges 16:1, he throws the jawbone away and he keeps going.
wow.
Like, or,
Mm,
somewhere in that context. I can't remember if it's right at the end
mm,
of 15 or right at the beginning of 16. But he literally says, this jawbone's so great, it gave me the ability to kill all these men. And then he throws it away. And we do the
mm.
same thing in our everyday lives, right? When it comes to those things of security, satisfaction, significance, success, a lot of S's there. But like when we go to look for all of those things in our everyday life, we reach for things that we're just going to end up throwing away because they're actually meaningless in light of eternity later. But we try to find that safety, that significance, that success, that security. We try to find it with those things here and now. And the truth of the matter
Mm,
is that much like Samson, this was a point that I made with these young people, is I said, Samson tried to reach into something that was dead and rotten to try to protect his own life. And we do the same
wow.
thing all the time. We
Mm,
say, oh man, if I want to be secure, I gotta reach into something that I think is going to give me the security. If I want success, I got to
mm,
reach into something that I think is going to give me the success. But we're reaching into these dead, dying, broken things that God knows we probably shouldn't be touching to begin with, and we're
wow.
trying to pull something life giving out of them, and it just doesn't work. And if
Wow.
that's the cycle that we find ourselves in, then yeah, we'll never truly find success. We'll end our lives feeling like a failure, even though we've done all these
Mm,
great things, right? All of these things that were noteworthy. Um,
mm,
but the thing that I always think about in this vein of like success and where do we find our significance and how do we keep the right perspective, I remember, I know recently you released a podcast where you were talking with a gentleman, and you talked very quickly about Billy Graham from kind of a different context, a different perspective,
mhm,
and you were talking a
mhm,
little bit more about kind of his family life, which I think is
mhm,
a cautionary thing for us to keep in mind. What if we're
mhm,
leaders or ministers of the gospel, which we all are, right?
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
but the thing that I always think about is the truth. The truth is that I believe that. Um,
mm,
we all know Billy Graham, right?
mm.
You say Billy Graham, people are going to know who Billy Graham is. But how many of us know the name Mordecai Ham?
Hmm.
You might know the name Mordecai Ham, but
Wow.
Mordecai Ham is the evangelist that is credited with leading Billy Graham to the Lord.
Mhm.
Now, Sam, let me ask you a question.
Mm.
Do we think that Mordecai Ham is any less significant than Billy Graham is?
My goodness.
It,
Brother.
sure, Billy Graham drew the bigger crowds. Absolutely.
Brother.
No doubt about it.
Mm.
But Mordecai Ham led the one to the faith that would lead those millions to the faith.
Goodness gracious. Brother, you
So
are
which one's more
preaching right
successful?
now. Yeah.
Like, which one's more successful?
Mm,
The answer is
mm.
there's not one that's more successful in the eyes of the Lord.
No, that's right.
I truly believe that when Mordecai gets to the great white throne, that judgment seat of
Mm-hmm.
Christ is going to give him a big old high five and be like, "You the man." You know what I'm saying? Because
That's right.
without Mordecai Ham's obedience,
Yeah.
think of how
Yeah.
history changes.
Yeah. Yeah,
But we look
brother.
at, oh my
Brother.
gosh, Billy drew the crowds. Billy did all these
Yeah.
things. Billy did the
Uh-huh.
miraculous. I want to go to the Billy Graham, museum, the library, and those things are all great, right? But I'm
Mm.
personally a little bit bigger of a Mordecai Ham fan because Mordecai didn't look at it and go, oh man, not a real big crowd tonight. This one's probably going to be a stinker. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh man, not enough people bought tickets for the conference. It's probably not going to be that great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 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 Dude, here's what I hear you saying. Correct me if I'm wrong. Whether you're Mordecai Ham or Billy Graham, Mordecai Ham who led Billy Graham or Billy Graham who led thousands, millions of people, that's not defined as success. What is
Correct.
defined as success is what I hear you saying is obedience.
1,000%. 1000%.
That is so good. That is so good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we give way too much credit to
Mm,
what can be done in the big, public, exciting moments, the moments that have a big following, a big visibility. We give so much credit to those things, and we say that's when we're
mm,
being successful. That's
yeah.
that's when I know that I'm pleasing God.
Mm-hmm.
But we give far too little credit to the fact and the reality that God will reward us for our everyday, ordinary, seemingly small acts of obedience. Like you cannot have extraordinary outcome without some ordinary in there, right?
Gosh,
So
Jesus.
so it's this thing of us reworking and understanding and rewiring our outlook on our everyday life and our eternity to be able to say,
Mm,
Lord, I'm not going to wait for you to pack the room for me to believe you're doing a miracle. I believe you can do a miracle in the
mm.
mundane. Because
That's so
if you're going to
good.
do something extraordinary, I got to do something ordinary. I
That's
gotta
right.
I gotta show up to my school in a different way. I gotta show up to my job in a different way. I gotta show up to my family in a different way. Not in a way
Mm,
that's flashy or boisterous or
yeah.
cocky or taking the attention on ourselves, but different in a way that points them back to Christ. And if we will
Mm,
show up in these ordinary moments, in these ordinary places, which by the way is what Jesus did. So many of Jesus's miracles, let's go back to that, right? So many of Jesus's miracles were not done in these incredible, beautiful, ornate, extraordinary places with a giant LED wall behind them,
yes, sir.
right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Jesus did all these incredible miracles in ordinary places.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And
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 how
would
much more is
often
that a
tell.
prototype for us to follow?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And often would even perform the miracle and say to them, "Hey, don't tell anybody about this."
It's the worst
Where
marketing strategy of all time.
thank you. It's like, what do you mean, Jesus? You want people to know that you're the Messiah. You want people to know that you're here. You're doing God's work, and yet you say, "Don't tell anybody about this. You're
Right,
healed. Go in
right.
peace." It's like Jesus was not looking for any type of approval from others. He wasn't
Nope.
insecure about himself. It was just purely an act of obedience and saying, "Hey, I'm here to do the Lord's work."
Yeah.
And it's just so, man, you are speaking, you're ministering to me right now.
Mm.
Whoever is listening or watching this, like, God bless you. I know you will be blessed by this, but you're personally ministering
Oh
to me.
man.
This is so good. This is amazing. When you were even talking about Mordecai Ham, immediately I was thinking about Paul's journey and how um, Paul was able to reach thousands and millions of people through his act of obedience and surrender to Jesus Christ. But there's a man who relates a lot to Mordecai Ham who was asked by the Lord to go to Paul and pray for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we never hear of him ever again. And it's
Dude, and
like,
there's and
if
there's
God,
so there's so many of those stories in the scriptures. There's so many of those
so
stories
many.
in the scriptures where, I mean, that's a very important and key one. But there's so many where it's like God tells them to do something, they do it, we never hear about them again.
Never.
Most
Yeah,
of the time we don't even get their name. Like it's just
that's
like
right.
this little servant girl did this random guy in the community did this person did this,
That's right.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, what? Like this
Yeah,
this is marked in the annals of Christian history as one of the greatest acts of obedience of all time, and we don't even know the person's name.
that's right. That's right.
It's
Exactly.
crazy.
Exactly. So the question is for you and I, and for everybody who's listening and watching, if God uses you once, is it enough?
Mhm.
Are you fully secure in being a child of God that if he uses you once, even in private,
Yeah,
but you don't see the external acceptance from others or the praise of others, is it enough, basically?
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, it should be enough. It should be enough.
Should be, should be.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
that's a part of the journey of dying to ourselves daily, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a part of the journey of continually. One of my prayers every morning is based out of the Psalms, where the psalmist writes and he says, "May the favor of the Lord my God rest on me. Establish the work of my hands for me. Establish the work of
Mm.
my hands." And I think when you take scriptures and prayers like that and you couple it with, the challenges we see in the New Testament, Paul challenges us a ton when we think about things like fruit and gifts of the Spirit. And James challenges us to have works that are a sign of our faith. They don't earn
Mm-hmm.
us our salvation, but they are a sign of
Mm-hmm.
our salvation.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think that to hold it as simplistically as kind of the phrase that is popular in church circles right now of like, if you're not dead, God's not done. It's like I understand the sentiment of that.
Sure.
I think that it's a little bit too simplistic for us to bank our life on it, right?
Mm.
But the idea that for all of us, um, I think that there is too much case to be made in Scripture when it comes to the ideas of that we have way more in our life to produce than just one moment. Now,
Mm.
I think about, many stories I've heard over the years of, when a young child passes away or something of that nature, some type of heartbreak in that regard, where,
Mm.
they had a genuine love for Jesus at a very young age. And because of their story, people come to know the Lord through that. Now, in light of eternity, is that child going to be okay with maybe having just one major impact? Sure,
Mm.
absolutely. But I think that this is a part of where we have to partner with God when it comes to those everyday mundane moments, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if we will, I mean, Jesus says, "Open up your eyes, see that the fields are white for the harvest," right?
Mm.
Like
Mm.
there are opportunities for obedience everywhere.
Mm.
I'm reminded of even this week. One of the things that I do every morning when I pray and when I journal is I have a section at the very end. I don't like to-do lists personally, but I do like
Mm.
opportunity lists. So I
Mm.
like to write out opportunities for me to conquer that day. And that's
Wow.
essentially my way of partnering with the Lord to say, okay, Lord, what are some things that I can conquer today? What are some opportunities that I can make the most of? Because Paul tells us, I think it's in Ephesians 4, if I remember correctly, Ephesians 4 or 5, he talks about making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil, right?
Yeah, that's
So it's
right.
like, okay,
Hmm.
if I'm going to be successful in this life, then I'm not going to wait just for the big stage. I'm not going to wait for the big interview. I'm not going to wait for the thing to go viral. No, I'm gonna make the most of every opportunity. And so if I do that, then that's my time to be held accountable to the Lord for that day. Because if I write something
Mm.
down, and for example, one of the things that the Lord will do in my heart often, I'm not going to say every day, but often, He'll put this thing in me of like, I want you to text 3 people today an encouragement out of nowhere, and just let
Mm.
me do with it what I will do. And I go, okay, and so this happens to me often where I'll be scrolling through my contacts, or I'll be scrolling through my
Mm.
followers on Instagram, or I'll be scrolling through, people that I work with, and the Lord will go, that one. And I'll go,
Wow.
okay. And then here's the fun part. I got to pray, Lord, what the heck do you want me to say to
Yeah,
him?
yeah,
because,
that's right.
because if I try to manufacture this, it's going to be useless. It's going to be weird.
That's
It's
right.
going to, it's going to come out of complete nowhere. But
Yeah.
if this is truly you, and if you're truly calling me to be obedient to, something's going on that needs to be spoken to, and you want to use me to speak to it, this is essentially words of knowledge, right? Words of knowledge, words of
Mm.
wisdom. In a way, it's operating in
Mm.
that gift of the Spirit, which again, so often we think, oh, the prophetic gifts are for the platform. No, they're not.
Mm.
They're for the everyday
No,
life of the believer, right?
that's right.
And
Yes,
so
correct.
I take God up on His invitation, and Sam, I cannot tell you how many times,
Hmm.
and I say this not to the glory of myself, like, oh, I'm so good, I'm so obedient. I say this because it means that God is hitting the mark and I'm partnering with Him in that. I cannot tell you how many times I hear back from people almost instantly or that same day, and they go, dude, I, I don't know how you knew to say that. I don't know where that came from, but thank you. You have no idea how much I needed that.
Yeah.
To me, when to me, when I get to the judgment seat of Christ, I think that
Yeah.
there is going to be just as much reward for those text messages as there are for my
Yeah.
sermons.
Come on. Come on, dude. That is incredible. I love that. It just puts things into perspective. Um, that's actually so practical, and it's a tool, it's a handle. I think what I hear you saying is, I think take time in your day, whether it's like 10, 15 minutes, an hour, maybe, if you have that time, sit with the Lord
Yeah.
and just ask Him, hey, Lord, what is it that you want me to be obedient today? It doesn't even have to
Mm-hmm.
be big, just in the little
Oh,
things. What was the term you used? An opportunity list? Is that what you said?
yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
I
specifically
I
write
love that.
opportunity. I have opportunities to conquer for the day.
I love that. And that's such a practical handle, man. It's like, I think for people that are listening, it's like, how do I practically apply this idea of being obedience in the ordinary things of life so that
Yeah.
God could do extraordinary things? I think just taking that time to make an opportunity list and
Mm,
listening to the Lord and say, what do you want to do today? Who do you want to encourage today? I think those are those moments where we could cultivate, obedience in our lives and in the little things, which compounds and does lead to the big things, I believe.
100%.
Yeah. And
100%.
so, when you talked about opportunity list and like texting people and encouraging them, you did that a couple of days ago with me. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just so spot on. It was amazing. So yeah, thank you for that. That was so practical. And I think
Absolutely.
it was a
Absolutely.
handle for people to take hold of.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think often when we think about impact, impact is such a complicated word in the
Mm,
Western Christian sphere, especially when we think about these two words, success and impact. These are two of the
mm,
words that we often get mixed up a lot, right?
Mm.
And we think too that impact means width, that scale is only wide, right?
Mm.
But the truth of the matter is that if someone walked up to you today, Sam, and they said, Sam, I just want you to know you have made such an impact in my life. I'm so
Mm.
grateful for you. They're probably not going to be talking about all of the many things that you've done. They more
Mm.
than likely have kind of one, two, maybe three key moments, key memories,
Mm.
key
Mm.
decisions you've made in mind, right? That
Mm.
have led to this deep impact that you've made in them. And so we've got to stop thinking that impact is a wide scope and a wide scale at all times, because here's the truth of the matter. None of us can change the world on our own. And
Yeah.
if there's one thing that I wrestle with in the modern North American westernized church, is this idea that we're all going to go change the world. And it's like, hey, as the body of Christ, absolutely, right? As the body of Christ, the capital C church, yeah, we can go turn the world upside down. We've been doing it for thousands of years. We're going to do it for thousands more until Jesus comes back, one way or another, whether it's on platforms or it's underground like the church in China right now. We are going to keep
Mm.
turning the world upside down, no doubt about it. But if
Mm.
the focus for me is on changing the world, I've missed it, because I can't change the world. That's Jesus's job. I can't change the world, but if I will partner with the Lord, if I will
Yeah.
sit with the Lord, actually
Yeah.
listen to what he's telling me to do, because I can't obey something that I'm not paying attention to. If
Mm.
Jesus is telling me to do something but I'm not giving him the time to actually pay attention to it, I'm missing it right there. But
Wow.
even then, even when I have listened and I'm now saying, okay, Lord, I'm going to actively partner with you, it's not so I can go change the world. It's so that I can change somebody's world. If
That's
I can
so
change one
good.
person's world today, and you
Yeah.
think about the compound again of that, the and we see this in the life of Jesus. There are times where he says, hey, don't go tell anybody, and they still tell people. There's other times that he
Mm.
just tells them, peace out, go tell whoever you want, and they go tell a
That's
bunch of
right.
people, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
compound of, if I can start every day going, Lord, help me to change somebody's world today, whether it's through one conversation, a text, an act of generosity, whatever that may be. God,
Yeah.
I know that you are going to see that and honor that and keep track of that and reward that just as much as every packed altar that I've prayed for, just as much as every sermon that I've preached that people have shown me their notes or said thank you on social media. And I'm so grateful for
Yeah.
all of those things. And those
Mm-hmm.
things will
Mm-hmm.
continue to be a part of my life until the day that I die, one way or another.
That's right.
But the thing that I'm most focused on is, Lord, how can I make a deep impact? And how can I
Yeah.
do it today? That, my
That's
friend, is
so good.
success.
Absolutely, man. I don't think there's anything to add to that. I know this is the heart of God, because Jesus says he leaves the 99 for the one. You know,
Yeah.
he's always after that somebody, the one. And
Mhm.
I think this is purely the heart of God. Thank you, Russ. I really appreciate that. I have one last question for you. Um,
Yeah.
this is the question that I ask all my guests, because the podcast is called the Make God Known podcast. And I want to ask you, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone to make God known?
Mhm. Yeah. I think that the most clear call that Jesus gives to us when it comes to making him known is,
Mm.
he says, they will know that you are my disciples by your love for them. And it goes back to so much of what we've already talked about. It's
Mhm.
not a revolutionary thought in the sense of I didn't come up with it, but I'm pretty sure the last time I checked, my Bible says that there's nothing new under the sun, right? And
That's
so,
right. Yes.
um, but I think it's so much of it comes back to that sacrificial, inconvenient, but authentic love that we are able to show people.
Yeah.
And I think too often we get caught up in, the argument of introverted, extroverted. Can I really talk to people if I'm introverted? Can I really help people if I'm introverted? Some of the most
Mm.
deeply impactful people in my life are people that are extremely introverted, right?
Mm.
And so I want to throw that out there to somebody that maybe is watching this or listening to this, and you feel like I'm introverted, so I can't make a big difference. That is a
Mm.
lie, right?
Yes, sir.
All Jesus calls us to do is love people well, to love
That's
people
right.
sacrificially, to to
Mm.
to follow the model that He gives us, which is to put down any modicum of a title and instead pick up a towel. And if we'll pick up a towel, and if we will sacrificially serve the people around us, that's how we make
Mm.
God known.
Wow.
The greatest reputations of people when they die and when people honor them at a celebration service, whatever you want to call it, the greatest testimonies of their life are not, oh my gosh, they preached so great, they sang such great songs, they made such great graphics. Nobody cares about that stuff at that point.
Mm.
What do they remember? They remember how, man, he showed up to my football games, and he showed up and he bought me coffee. Man, she texted me every week, letting me know she was praying for me. They remember those small, little, seemingly insignificant, but all the more meaningful acts of love. That's how we make
Oh,
God known.
that is so good. Wow. Thank you, Russ. I really appreciate you taking your time to have a chat with me. This has been such a refreshing conversation for me and is such a great reminder. Honestly, truly, truly, truly. When you texted me saying that this was on your heart,
Yeah.
I immediately knew it was going to be a great conversation, because you could tell you're passionate about it. It's brewing in you. It has been brewing in you, I feel. And it's telling. And so I
Thank you,
appreciate
man.
you so much, Russ. To many more conversations to come, dude. This is definitely
Absolutely.
not the end of it. We'll keep it going.
Come on, bring it on. I'm ready. Let's go.
Yes, sir. Much love, man. I appreciate you. I hope you enjoyed that video. I want to give you guys a few reminders before you guys leave. Please subscribe, comment, and also like the video. The more engagement there is, the better. Second, if you want to be notified on when these videos come out, click the bell button on the top right-hand corner of the YouTube page. And lastly, if you want to check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, please click the link down below in the description. Other than that, have a great day, guys. Ciao.